Yeah, I'm systems librarian. I guess my official title has changed to digital preservation and repository librarian at the University of Maryland Libraries. And I'll be giving you our update on what we've been doing lately. I feel like I've given a lot of these presentations about our migration, but I'll kind of put it in context of what the latest news is. So to give you a little background, what we're talking about today is digital collections. So we also, in the libraries, we run a DSpace institutional repository. We have archive space. We have obviously the website for the libraries, and then digital collections we run. As you can see up here at the top, we have uh, audio visual as a separate sort of tab here. We do run Avalon Media System for our AV content, and I'm going to be talking primarily about the migration of the paged media within digital collections today. University of Maryland's been Fedora users since really early on, the late 2000s. We are still running what we call the legacy repository, which is that original implementation of Fedora. That is now, I can say finally after many years, definitely being shut down at the end of this month. We will no longer be running Fedora 2. It might be the last Fedora 2 in the world, who knows? But that's coming to an end now. It's an end of an era. We run a front end for our digital collections out of using Drupal, which is our CMS for the library's website. We have an application called Archelon, which we use for the administration of page media objects. And as I said before, we've already implemented Avalon for the streaming media. We are currently rolling out a new Solar index and indexing system for this repository. That's our current development work while we're finishing up migrating the page media into this Archelon system. Yeah, I'll talk more about the future at the end. It is a seemingly perpetual migration. So this kind of gives you an idea of the overall landscape here. We've got this legacy repository. 2021, 22, we were focused on moving the streaming media into Avalon. And then 23 and 24, we've been focused on moving the page media into Archelon. That gives you some idea of how many objects we're talking about. So give you a little description of our system. This diagram shows you kind of just the high level what's going on with our system. So you see at the top, you've got your users interfacing. So we have curatorial staff interfacing with the Archelon application to manage digital objects that are stored in the FC repo architecture, which is really we call it repository first, so we put Fedora really at the center of that, but there obviously it's then a sort of loosely coupled cluster of services and applications running around that make it useful. We have system staff like myself interfacing with the system through command line tools, doing bulk import and export of content. And we have on the other side there on the right, we have users. So we have the public coming to seeing the content through our website. We have external collaborators now who can harvest our content through OAI-PMH. And we have also, we use an external service for preservation called AP Trust. Okay, so what has the migration process been looking like for these page media objects? So we adopted extract, transform, load as kind of the paradigm for how we do the migration. So we took created a fork of the Fedora migration utils. We don't think we had to make very many changes, but there were some changes we made to it to kind of work with our custom metadata and so forth. So we took a fork of that, created a migration utility that exports the binaries, really all the files that are in the Fedora file system, puts them onto disk on this processing server that we have, and also pulls the metadata out of the XML and puts it into a CSV. CSV is the data format that we use for import into our new system. So we're really trying to get, some of the transform done with this extract tool. We then took that CSV, cleaned it up, metadata librarian went through and normalized, cleaned up the metadata, added additional metadata if necessary for the new system. Where possible, we replaced the JPEG files that we had stored in the old legacy Fedora with our preservation TIFF. So we've really scaled up, I think, our capabilities in terms of the amount of data we can handle in our repository. And so we thought we could, at least for the page media, we could put the preservation file actually into the repository, make it easier to access for reference purposes or for request fulfillment. And so where possible, we were able to do that. And then we use our standard import process, load the content as unpublished into this Archelon system. I'll talk a little bit about publication workflows, but we can load it unpublished. And then once the content was reviewed by the curators, we could publish it, at which point the handle, which is our system we use for permalinks, got updated. And so that's actually when the migration kind of happens, is when that handle is updated, because that's when the permalink will now point to the new copy of that digital object in the new repository. So we had to implement some new features to make this happen. I alluded to a couple of those, but we moved away from more sort of a boutique content model. So when we had rolled out Archelon originally, which is several years ago, we started with new collections. So we kept the legacy repository running. We were putting new content into Archelon. And when we were doing that, we were each project was getting kind of its own object profile, if you will. And over time, we found it to be unsustainable, because when we made any changes in our application, we basically had to update all the different content models to support those changes. And that became problematic. So we're now using just one content model really for everything, with one exception, which is newspapers. Newspapers continue to kind of be their own thing, but everything else is just an item, quote unquote, item in the repository. We have support for language tags. So I'll talk a little bit about that later. I'll show an example, but we needed to do that for a particular collection we have that has multilingual metadata. We implemented OAI PMH, both for Avalon and Archelon, to allow others to harvest our metadata. We made a decision to separate. So we kind of borrowed this concept really from Samvera. Actually, it has this idea of the admin set, right? We decided to separate administration, so grouping of content for administration purposes, like access control or curatorial responsibility, and grouping content for consumption by the public. So we call these later groupings presentation sets to distinguish them from admin sets. And this gives us more flexibility to arrange the content, how it makes sense for the data on the one hand, and for administering the data, but then to also present that content to the public in ways that are more flexible. So we also implemented, as I mentioned before, publication workflows with handles. So the idea that an object can be put into the repository, it's still unpublished, not discoverable in the public interface, but the curator can look at it, can make edits to the metadata, and then publish it, at which point the handle, if it doesn't already have a handle assigned to it, will get minted automatically. And if the handle exists, but is it pointing to the other repository, it will automatically be able to recognize that and update the handle so it points to the Archelon repository copy. We also upgraded our image server as part of this. That was really necessary. So we're using Cantaloupe, and we have a persistent caching system called Mezcal that caches mezzanine files in a persistent way, which makes performance a lot better for users. So here's the OAI PMH interface. This is just the front end that you can go look at. Obviously, it's mostly just an API that machines will talk to, but you can go look at it. Here's an example of that multilingual metadata. So this is a Japanese children's books collection, and you'll see down at the bottom under title, you can see how the language tags appear in the application, and those are actually, that's part of the RDF spec or RDF capability, a feature of RDF that you can tag strings that are or literals in your RDF as having a language tag, and you see that's Japanese and Latin script or Japanese, those two. So this is just the search interface. One thing we implemented on the front, this is the public interface. Now this is Drupal. One thing we've got implemented here is thumbnails. So that's really good for users to be able to kind of get an idea of what that object is, and that new image server really makes that possible to have those thumbnails. It's performant enough to manage that. So what are we going to be doing in the future? So right now, in the coming year or maybe 2 years, we hope to, after we finish this migration, we hope to upgrade our Avalon. So we have that on the schedule to go to the current version, or maybe 7.7, 7.8, probably 7.8. We want to release an Archelon 2.0. So we've done some work on the Rails and Blacklight updates for Archelon. It's a Rails, it's a Blacklight application built on top of Blacklight, and so the Rails version that it uses and the Blacklight version are both pretty old at this point. So we need to upgrade those. That'll be Archelon 2.0. Perhaps as part of 2.0 or maybe as 2.1, we are going to release a new search interface or search capability based on the work on the index that we've been doing. And then we also plan to launch locally here a digital collections community to try to better integrate, sort of have more structured activities where we can integrate users, that is curators mainly, into our development work and get their feedback, have a more ready way to get their feedback. And then we do have plans to move to Fedora 6 and AWS. So this is, I should have mentioned this before, but Archelon right now is actually Fedora 4, 4.7, whatever the latest version of 4.7 is. And we really want to get to Fedora 6. So we're going to have to go to 5, I think, pass through 5 and go on to 6. And we also need to go from on-prem infrastructure to AWS. So that's where our campus is headed. And so there's a lot of unanswered questions about that, but in the exact order we do that AWS and that Fedora migration is unclear at this point, but that's something we're going to be looking towards. So that is my presentation, and yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Awesome, thank you. Thanks, Josh. Kate is inviting everybody to DC for your big reveal, or your big taking down a Fedora 2 party. So,
all right, yeah, that's been long in the making. Yeah, Doran, you have a question?
Yeah,
my only contribution to this entire effort.
It's not true, but party planning is a key job responsibility, though. So if you're yeah, Doran.
Yeah, thanks, Josh, for the presentation. Certainly look forward to the party in College Park to celebrate taking down Fedora 2. And so I was curious about your move to a generic model for multiple types, which sounds appealing. And the question is, do you have content-specific viewers for, say, videos separated still images or books or what have you? And if so, how do you handle that differing presentation with a generic model?
Yeah, so we do have some diversity of content. So the content models that are items, right? So newspapers are their own thing, and mainly the reason for that is because of the way the text is laid out, and we have you know, articles as well as issues of newspapers. There are articles in the newspaper, and so it creates a more of a hierarchical, I guess, model, and that doesn't really fit with our item. But the other things like books, manuscripts, archival folders, uh, still images, they all kind of fit this idea of paged media, right? Still image, if you scan the back of it, it might have more than one page, right? And it's still image, but it might just be one image. But there's really no functional difference in looking at a still image versus looking at a single page, document. It's just so we found that actually works okay for us. We don't have specialized features that couldn't be supported that way. We do also have email as one of those are also items, and that has some unique elements to it, but we were able to make it work. Now, what we haven't done is because we use Avalon Media System for streaming media, we don't have our videos following the same model. They just rely on whatever Avalon provides for that content model. So we didn't have to accommodate streaming media into this single model. Yeah, so I hope that answers the question.
Awesome. There's just one more question here in the Q&A, and then we'll move on to the next presentation. But the question is, how are admin sets and presentation sets managed? Is there any confusion related to having overlapping hierarchies?
Yes. So I don't know if there's confusion. Can be slightly counterintuitive because so basically I'll just start out by saying admin sets are PCDM collections. So we adopted the Portland Common Data model early on, and we created PCDM collections. So admin sets are those, and what we added onto it were presentation sets. And essentially how that's implemented is there is a published vocabulary with URIs that represent these presentation sets. So and we have a small application that allows us to publish this vocabulary with these URIs to say, like, Prang digital children's books, the URI is this, and we then add a triple to the RDF resource for the item that is a member of that to say it's aggregated by this URI. So we do it in RDF. It's just a single triple to define something as a presentation set, and then on the public side, the public user interface looks at the Solr index and sees, oh, these things are grouped together here, and they're in this presentation set, which when the thing gets indexed, that sort of RDF triple gets turned into a value in the Solr index document, and it's able to display it as a digital collection. So where you get into a little bit of trickiness there is that you'll have things in multiple presentation sets. And then when you're looking at your content in Blacklight, your facet numbers don't always add up perfectly. And that can create some confusion, I think, for users. But I think it's a relatively small problem.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
And if you have any other follow-up on that, Ben, certainly you can get a hold of Josh. But we are going to turn over to the next presentation. Thank you so much for the update.
Thank you.